I'm Drew Chapin, coming to you today from Chicago, and I am thrilled to moderate this discussion, restoration through community. So to level set what I mean when I say restoration, what we're talking about is the journey back, back to our families, to society, to the workforce, and really back to self. And that's an exceedingly difficult path to walk, no matter who you are or what kind of help or support system you have. But one thing that I've lived and seen in my own experience is how much better that path can be when it's done with others. Communities like the white collar support group and others that form around a shared experience, like some of the ones that my panelists today are involved in, can make that path easier and also a lot more rewarding. So today, I'm thrilled to be joined by three people whose lives and work embody that cause and mission and spirit. First, I'd love to welcome Pamela Winn. Pamela was a registered nurse before she was convicted of mortgage fraud and sentenced to 78 months in prison. Pamela turned her setback into advocacy, founding RestoreHER, a national policy organization that is dedicated to the health, safety, and dignity of system impacted women. I'm also happy to welcome Gina Pendergraph, who has similarly leveraged her lived experience as a system impacted person to do good for others. She's a rock star in the white collar support group. If you're a member, you know that. She's an active leader in some of the related women's groups and meetings. And she's also one of the primary moderators at the Justice Impact Support Forum, which a lot of people have found a ton of help and support through. And finally, Michael Gaines, who had a successful banking career that was derailed by choices that led him to a 9-month and 6-day stint in prison. He's now a key cog in the machine at the Center for Employment Opportunities, where he helps people re-enter and find meaningful employment. These three people bring different experiences and perspectives, and yet they all share one truth, which is that restoration isn't something that happens to us, it's something that happens through us. So with that, let's dive into the conversation. Pamela, I'd love to start with you. When you look back at your story, for those of you who like heard your story on Nightmare Success with Brent Cassidy, we know that there were some really dark moments along the way. So I'd love to hear what that first spark was that shifted you from, just surviving, just trying to get through to fighting, especially when it comes to things like legislation and trying to solve these really big systemic problems. Or do we have Pamela muted, maybe? Let's see. Well, if not, we can come back to Pamela.
Yeah, she's still muted.
Oh, here. All right. Try to ask to unmute.
Okay, there we go.
There we go, Pamela. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Sorry about that. It wasn't allowing me to unmute. First of all, I'd like to thank Jeff for having me here and being a part of this conference, much needed conference, because as someone that does have a white collar crime, there's not ever much conversation or considerations for folks that have these type of crimes. Also, I wanted to make a small correction. I served a 78-month sentence for bank fraud, not mortgage. I don't know anything about mortgage.
Sorry about that.
No problem. But yes, for me, the things that prompted me that have me sitting here with you today, I think first and foremost would be the fact that I was sitting in a holding facility. I had not yet been convicted. I could have been home on bond, taking care of my own pregnancy, but I was denied the opportunity to bond out. And so I sat there for 18 months, not able to bond out, and endured being shackled, placed in solitary confinement, and and the shackling causing me to fall and miscarry my baby. So that is the thing that really motivated me to know that, I had to do something. I could not sit silent. And even in those 78 months, that was still, of course, very prominent in my thoughts. Because losing a life and then in the manner that it happened, I endured my miscarriage shackled to the bed. I was in a cell for about 5 hours with no way to call for help when I was going through when the miscarriage first started and I was hemorrhaging and having problems. Having to just wait on an officer to come around and do a check to know that there was a problem. And hearing the women that were in the pod beating on the doors, trying to make any kind of noise to get attention to an officer to come inside. So, and of course, the most humiliating and lowest things for me were not only enduring that miscarriage being shackled, but having two male officers between my legs that refused to give me any type of privacy, and then hearing that they threw my baby in the trash. So these were things that will, I mean, they just won't ever go away. And they are the main focus of why I started my organization and why I do the work that I do. And for me, because what happened to me was like very, it impacted my entire life. I felt like my response had to be something that was very impactful. And the most impactful thing that I could think of that I could do would be to change the law to prevent the things that had happened to me from happening to any other woman. So that was what moved me and have me here.
Incredible, Pamela. Thank you for sharing that and for and for being so open. Really appreciate that, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Um, Gina, I also want to ask you about your motivation. I see you constantly. You're on the meetings, you're on the forums. I hear from people who tell me that they've just been off the phone with you. You're seemingly everywhere. So what is it that keeps you in that fight and picking up the phone? Because you're one of these people who is just so generous with their time, and so it seems like they're so motivated. So what is it that keeps you picking up the phone?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm going to share this real quick. Pamela, your story just like hit me hard. Like, I mean, I've been in these groups for a long time, and Pamela, that was like the most profound thing I've heard since I've been in these groups. What's kept me picking up the phone is that somebody did it for me. And when you start in this space, like you don't know what's going on, you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know what to expect. Your mind goes to all these crazy places. And I got on the phone with somebody who'd already been through it and was home on home confinement. And she was out on the CARES Act, and she picked up the phone every single time that I called her. And so when my phone rings, it's not a question of what I'm doing or what I need to get done. It's I pick up the phone. And you know, the majority of the people that I speak with are women, and that's just because I can connect better with the women, um, because I know more about what they're going to go through, what they're going through at home, and so the connection.
Thank you. And Michael, I'd like to get you in here. It's one thing to pick up the phone and to talk to people who are seeking help and who are ready to accept help. I know that you work with a lot of people who might struggle to accept help. Maybe they've got a little too much pride. They're used to the way things used to be, or whatever. They're trying to brave it on their own. How do you crack that shell? How do you kind of like open people up and get people to the mindset where they're ready to accept the help of a community?
Well, first, to be able to understand that we've all been through our own journey, through the system. And I always disarm them when they come in the office. I always tell them, "Hey, you're in a safe place. There's no judgment here." And that always helps them because there's one thing people say, "Well, I understand." Have you been involved in the system? No, then you can't understand. So that always helps. And pride is something that we definitely talk about, especially with men because we're stubborn. And I tell them, now, and it's some of the best advice I got early on. When I came home, I had a really good friend of mine. He said, "Do you need anything?" I said, "No, man, I'm good. Had got a great job, everything's fine." And he was like, "Mike, now is not a time for you to stand in your pride. Pride is what got you in this mess." So I'm going to ask you again, do you need anything? I was like, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I talked to those guys, and a lot of them, and pride is tough, man, because it's hard to, if you've been somebody who's never had to ask anybody for anything or had to depend on someone, and you really needed the help. And it always helps when you have that support, and some people have it and some people don't. Some people come home to absolutely nothing. And so when they
Right.
come in with us, I'm like, hey man, we're family. We're in the same fraternity, whether we want to be in it or not. So you're talking to somebody right now who understands how tough this is right now for you. So that always helps, especially with the pride thing, because that's a hard hill to get over for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael, thank you. I think that's right. And really what I'm hearing there is trust. You know,
Absolutely.
I know I see that a lot with the white collar support group. When I talk to a person who reaches out to the group who could really use it, sometimes, I'll say show up to a Monday night, or show up on a Thursday morning, or show up Tuesday speakers, whatever, show up to something. And sometimes people hesitate. People aren't sure if they want to put themselves on camera, or, they'll join and they'll have the camera off, or they'll attend under a different name. And I think that's mostly fear from somebody who's hurting quite a bit.
That's
So
exactly what it
establishing
is.
that trust is obviously is a major component. So question for the panel, whoever wants to jump in here, is just how, like how do you do that in your roles as community or members or organizers? How do you think your organizations can help establish that trust? Like, what are some of the core pieces? I know that you just touched on a little bit of this, but how do you establish that trust?
Well,
Um,
for
I'll,
please.
I'll start for me. With women, I think it's a little different. Considering our natural role as, caregivers and nurturers or whatever. So we're more I guess more of that for one another inside. And we usually stay stuck to those connections when we return home. So we're continuously still speaking to women on the inside and understanding what's going on and doing what we can on the outside to make it better. There are like much less resources for women than they are for women. So that's another thing that kind of makes us a little more cohesive because we pass along information when we've been able to find things that work for us to other women so they, don't have to try and figure things out alone. And just that constant and consistent communication helps establish the trust and allowing them to have a voice through the voices that are outside that are doing the work is what usually works for us.
Well, we have to, with us, we have to acknowledge that there's a certain amount of PTSD um, involved. I remember when I came home, I called one of the guys that I was at the camp with. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just grilling some birds and hot dogs." He said, "Man, it's cool." I said, "Yeah." Nice. I said, it's good to be home. He said, "Yeah." And I asked him, I said, "Do you think we got PTSD?" He was like, "Mike, man, didn't matter how comfortable a prison we were in, we were still in prison. And it does a thing, to your head. So people who come home, especially to our offices, I mean, there's a certain amount of damage because we're all damaged. And, and we create our own demons. And the fact that we had to endure that process really doesn't help our demons. It makes it worse. So you have to first acknowledge that, hey, man, we're here. And like Pamela just said, it's difficult with men because there's a vulnerability that we don't want to give. There's a certain amount of trust that we're afraid to give because we don't want to be perceived as weak, or needy. So that
Mm.
trust is extremely important to let them know, man. We're here, we're on the same team. We're your biggest cheerleaders. And that's what I always tell them. You come to my office, I'll call it the keep it real room. So, I'm your biggest cheerleader, man. Whatever you want to do, that's what we're going to do. And because I understand how tough it is.
That's great. And Gina, at the Justice Impact Support Forum or any of these other, the women's group, the things that you're involved in, anything about really earning that trust and making people feel comfortable to engage?
I think one of the things I tell people is you're not being judged. Um, like there was a gal, she's gone away now, but she'll be back soon, hopefully. But she couldn't get into the white collar support group. And she kept texting me and she's like, I'm not getting the email. And I said, check your spam, check your junk. She goes, I don't think Jeff wants me in the group. And I actually laughed just because we don't turn people away. And I'm like, no, you're definitely welcome in the group. Like she's like, yeah, but what I did. And I said, it, that's you're a white collar criminal. You're in the right spot. And so gaining people's trust that way. Um, I to get into the white collar support or to the justice impacted support forum, we do ask you, like, have you been convicted of a white collar crime? Have you, or do you have somebody that's family member that's justice impacted? And that's only to keep, you know, people that are trying to sell something to the group. Um, so, if you feel the need to join with a fake name, just answer our questions as from the administrators and you're welcome here. So, um, letting people know that we're not judging them is a good first step for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Gina. Pamela, I'd like to talk a little bit about Restore Her.
sure.
What does success look like for you and Restore Her? I guess the big, is there a finish line? Like, is there like a thing where you go like, okay, yeah, no, we did it. That's good. Now we're
Okay.
good.
So, as far as Restore Her goes, I've been very blessed that we have been able to make a lot of progress for justice impacted women. We've been able to pass legislation in 27 states, 26 around the Dignity for Incarcerated Women's Act. And that looks like the dignity bills are basically, um, I guess, customized for what's needed in each state based on the directly impacted women in those states. But most of the bills look like what my situation looked like, which bans shackling and solitary confinement for incarcerated pregnant women, which is a big win because at the time, I had never been involved in any kind of politics, legislation, any of that. So when I passed the legislation in Georgia, I remember getting an overwhelming number of people reaching out to me because they were telling me that there is no legislation that completely bans solitary confinement in the United States. So it was a historical piece of legislation, and then to be able to pass it in a number of states, not just Georgia, and also being able to have that language placed in the First Step Act, and hearing at that time Representative Karen Bass tell my story on the floor, on the House floor for the final vote to get that bill passed. I still don't even have words to describe that. I was able to be present there on a whim. I just got a phone call. I was at home and I was told, Van Jones, he was like, they're doing the final vote on the First Step Act in a few hours today. Would you like to be here? And I was like, sure, not having a clue, what that looked like. I had never been in the Capitol, State House, and none of that. So it was all new for me. And sitting there in the gallery, thinking to myself, well, this is actually boring. This is what they do. This is how the bills are passed. And listening to the legislators tell stories give their reasons why and why not pass this piece of legislation. And so as we sitting there, we heard someone say fall. And I remember Olivia, which was one of Van's assistants, saying to me, Pamela, are they talking about you? And I'm like, no, I don't know anybody in here. So they couldn't be talking about me. And as we kept listening, we heard the word shackling. And I remember leaning over and looking down, onto the floor and seeing Representative Karen Bass standing there. And she was telling my story at the podium as if I had met her personally and told her what happened to me. And after she was done, she said, "This is why we should vote to pass the First Step Act." And they started the voting. I remember asking Van, "We just have to get the majority, right?" And he was like, "No, we have to get 2/3." And I was like, "Oh shit, that's a lot more than just getting the majority." They had 15 minutes to vote. 15 minutes seemed like an eternity. I was just sitting there looking at the
vote
little
total.
screen on the wall, looking at folks' votes, and then the 15 minutes was up. And he had told me the number had to be like 271 or something like that. And we were like at 268, 269 when the time was up. And I remember looking at him and thinking, we didn't make it. And he said, "It's okay, Pam." He said, "Watch the speaker." He said, "The 15 minutes is just to keep everybody, on a time frame." He was like, "But the voting is not over until the speaker stands up." And so now I felt like I was at a tennis match. I'm going from the speaker to the wall, speaker to the wall. And it hit 271. And I looked at Van and I was like, did it? Did we do it? And he was like, "Yes." That moment still brings up a lot of feelings for me because in sitting there in that moment, all I could think about was sitting in solitary confinement, had just lost my baby, had heard my baby had been thrown in the trash. I felt completely hopeless and helpless. And now to be sitting in the House of Representatives of the United States and hearing a woman talk about what happened to me, and people vote and pass a bill that had language that I wrote in it to protect women that I had left behind. There's no words to describe that feeling. And that was the very first win that we had. And then after that, I don't know, it just seemed like dominoes falling because it was state after state after state. Um,
Right.
and so for me, I'm gonna say the biggest win because you asked me what is the finish line. So when I decided to start this organization and do this work, my finish line looked like I wanted to end prison birth in the United States. And I wanted to provide alternative sentencing for women in the United States. And so after the Dignity for Incarcerated Women's Act, after, it passed so many places and passed on the federal level, I drafted what we have now, which is the Women's Care Act. And what the Women's Care Act does, it defers a pregnant woman's sentence until 12 weeks up to a year after she has her baby. So she comes back to serve her time after she's taken care of that pregnancy and her baby. And it's important on a number of levels that I won't get into here because I know we don't have the time, but it was passed in Colorado in 2023. So in Colorado, there is no prison birth unless for whatever reason this woman has mitigating circumstances that says she's, a grave public safety risk and has to be um, detained. But other than that, these women get up to a year after they have their babies before they have to look at, serving time for whatever they've done. And currently, we are active working on the Women's Care Act in California, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina. We just got a call from the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and they're interested in passing it in Texas. Also, Illinois. We got a call from Illinois from a directly impacted woman that works for First Lady Pritzker, and they're interested in doing it there as well. So we've been getting a good response for it. Florida, yes, Florida is a hard place. We still get a lot of complaints there. We are looking at Florida. Definitely, I am from the South. I'm born and raised in Georgia, and so passing anything in the South is a big deal for me because we often hear that things don't move in the South, but I'm an example that things do move in the South because we passed that shackling and solitary bill throughout the entire South. And so yes, they're definitely everything in the South is definitely on the radar. But that's what success looks like for us to end prison birth, because no pregnant woman should be incarcerated. I don't care how new the facility is, how great it is. They just can't accommodate a pregnant woman. And honestly speaking, they can't properly accommodate women, period, which is why we're also pushing for alternative sentencing for women. We have unique needs that are not met. And it's very important, as human beings, because I call my work human rights work instead of criminal justice work, because the things that we ask for are due to any human being, not just folks that have directly impacted.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Just
Sure.
so impressive and impactful. And I can't help but share this. I know this is like maybe a little silly, but I know that in my own experience, I broke my finger while I was incarcerated playing softball. And I know how bad the medical care and how like
Yeah.
little they cared about that stuff was. I can't imagine going through like a real medical situation under the care of the BOP, especially something so sensitive and so, intense. Like yeah, it's unthinkable. Thank you. Um, Gina, I'd like to go back to you. It's really clear to me and to anybody who knows you as part of the group that community is really a core part of who you are. And I remember when you went away, wondering like, man, how is she gonna do this? Like, what were some of those practical things that you did while you were away? Steps that you took to establish and maintain like that community spirit or community, how did you find your community and how did you kind of like keep that going while you were incarcerated?
So I wrote a blog while I was in prison on Core Links once a week. I would, maybe every other week, I would handwrite my blog and I would type it to my sponsor on the outside. And she's got a master's in English, so she would clean it up because, writing on Core Links, it's very hard to get your message out. So she would clean it up for me. We'd have a conversation about it, and she would post it. So that was my connection back to the justice impacted community on the outside. On the inside, I didn't do well. Prison really wasn't for me. I know that sounds stupid, but um, some people there seem to do just fine. And for me, I was fighting the system every single day. Um, I ended up getting a shot for refusing a pregnancy test. I'm old and I've had a full hysterectomy. I can't be pregnant. And so, I just didn't do well there. What's interesting is now my connection back to where I was is stronger than when I was in there. So weekly, I mail my old bunkie a book. She's got nobody on the outside, and I either get donated books and mail them, wrap them up, do my little thing, or I'll Amazon her books. I print out and mail crochet patterns to women in the different facilities. So that's my connection back to the inside and me giving back. When I asked for a
Gina, that was
donation,
my job on the inside. I
crocheting.
draw. No, I draw. So I used to create the stencils for them to crochet whatever they wanted to make.
Nice,
Yeah, because they
nice.
were limited into being able to get patterns sent in and all of that
Mhm.
thing. And since I drew, one of the ladies was like, "Well, can you just draw us a pattern?" And I was like, "I've never done that before, but I learned." And yeah, that was what I spent my time doing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll download one pattern and I can mail it to 5 different facilities. And when I collect book donations, I let people know that every time that you donate a book, it's going to be read 10 times before it's even placed in the library. So I'm a big reader, so I think that community or reading is really important. And what I learned here from the very beginning was healing happens in community. And in my allocution statement to my judge, that was pretty much my plea for, the lowest sentence possible because I needed to be on the outside to heal. And I wasn't going to heal being incarcerated.
That's great. Thank you, Gina. I'd like to go back to the group. Anyone can jump in on this. 10 years from now, zoom out a little bit. 10 years from now, when you look back at this period of time, hopefully there's a lot of shift. Laws might change, especially with Pamela's help. There will be people helped. There will be groups grown. I'm confident in that. But what's your greatest hope for our community? What do you hope we can sit here 10 years from now and look back and say has happened in the last decade?
What I'd like to share on that one is my hope for this community is that everybody can find this type of help when they either get indicted or arrested or facing white collar charges. I think that the main thing that we hear so often from people is, I wish I would have found you sooner. Um, you know, something that, like, if you have a drinking problem, okay, I can go to the doctor, I can go to the therapist, I can go to AA, I have these options. When you get indicted or arrested, you, you have a lawyer. That's all you know. And the fact that we're here and not everybody knows about us. I mean, if you do Google it, you find it. But I hope that people can find us easier and it becomes more well known that there is support for people who are justice impacted.
Michael
Well,
or Pamela?
oh, well, just kind of piggybacking off of what Gina just said, I hope, we get to a point, well, society itself gets to a point where, the stigma isn't so damaging. I talk a lot during the meetings, you look up the right to be forgotten and the Google searches and how, you pay for what you did, but you never really stop paying. And people say a lot. I mean, in what I do, I get with people and like, hey, do you hire people with backgrounds? Of course we do. I'm like, okay, there's no camera present. Do you hire people with back? And of course, it's a completely different conversation because nobody wants to be, oh no, we definitely believe in second chances. And again, when there's no camera, that goes out the window. And what I just hope is a group like this. And like Gina said, I mean, I was one of those people. I'm like, man, I wish I knew about this, before, everything happened with me. I found it after, but this is to be able to be in a group and talk to a group of people who truly understand what you went through. Because you say it all the time, your family, your friends, they pray for you, they support you, but they don't understand. They hurt with you, they serve with you while you're in prison, but they still don't understand. So, my hope is, a group like this, it does nothing but grow, does nothing but expand to help um, try and tackle that stigma that we're inevitably going to face. And hopefully not, but it looks like it's an eternal thing until you leave here. That's something you're going to have to battle. So I just hope something like this continues to grow.
And Pamela?
For me, I would like to say that I hope in the next 10 years that we can change the narrative of what being accountable for a mistake looks like. And so not looking at the system as being as a punitive measure, but what it should be, rehabilitation, and support for folks, because everyone that's in the system overwhelmingly, has a story, has a reason or something that led them to do whatever it was that they done. And that is usually the rooted cause of the issue. And so instead of being so punitive, we've been taught as a society that anyone that is convicted of a crime should be punished, should be punished. And I would like for the narrative to change and say, folks should be rehabilitated, folks should be helped, folks should be giving whatever it was that was lacking or whatever the root cause, help for that caused them to have committed a crime. And I think that would be a good start for changing a lot of the bad things that we hear, a lot as well as those stigmas that we hear about now.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Pamela and Gina and Michael, thank you for your vulnerability and your time. We all know how precious that is. And I'd like to thank everyone here for leaning into this subject with us. What we've heard today is that restoration and second chances really start with connection. And so, on behalf of everyone here, thank you to the panelists for your honesty and leadership and the hope that you bring to everyone.